Hello, my friends. This is Lynda Lippin, and welcome to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Well, hello, my friends. It's Lynda Lippin, and welcome back one more time to the Pilates Goddess podcast. I had my post-knee surgery, post-op appointment this morning, and I am thrilled, actually. My knee feels a lot better. They got rid of the quote-unquote parrot beak meniscus tear, which left a sharp triangle of cartilage kind of sticking out in my knee, which is exactly what it felt like. Cleaned up some other cartilage and really left me in a better place than I was before. I'm also very excited because I was good and I followed all of their post-op recommendations in terms of exercises to start like the day after surgery when things still really hurt, but I had opiates, and started in week 2 doing more flexion and Pilates mat and my own work. And by the time I got to the surgeon today, having been doing 2 walks a day, and I actually took the stairs to the subway up and down, he told me that I was an overachiever and that I was doing very well and I was way ahead of the game. And in fact, he didn't even send me to physical therapy, although he offered it. He was like, if you want a trainer for a few weeks, I'm happy to give it to you. But he printed up his whole rehab exercise protocol and gave it to me and said, here you go. I'll do what you're doing. Expand as you can into what I've given you, and I'll see you in a month. So I'm really, really excited about that situation, gotta say. That could not, for me, have gone any better than it did. And it was also kind of nice to have some acknowledgement from, my sports medicine surgeon at Mount Sinai that my work is good and that my work is helpful. So today, I really just wanted to talk to you guys about the Pilates equipment, the Pilates Apparatus, and what it is, what the different pieces are, kind of what they do, how they're different, and what brands there are out there, and how to kind of pick what you want for your studio or for your home practice, and which pieces you might want, right? Which might be most important. So let me start off by kind of framing this discussion like I usually do. I've seen a lot of questions online from folks who have been going to, lots of reformer classes, feel like they're spending a lot of money on that, and have realized that they could probably buy a reformer if they have room for it at home, obviously, and the means to do that. And, that cost of the reformer would basically work itself out in a few months, and then they would be ahead. And there are plenty of great Pilates equipment video classes on Pilatesology and Pilates Anytime on YouTube and on different instructors, kind of paid on-demand channels. I also, on the other hand, have seen a lot of questions from both Pilates teachers who say only no mat and Pilates clients who might only know, say, mat and reformer, asking if there's other Pilates equipment and what that equipment might be, what it might look like, and what it does. So, as always, when I see tons of questions coming from different places and different people about the same thing, I assume that it's something lots of people are thinking about. So here we are. So Joseph Pilates was extraordinarily inventive and actually invented a lot of apparatus. Whether you are classically or contemporary trained, however you identify yourself, I recommend, if you live in a metropolitan area that has a fully equipped classical Pilates studio, it could be worth going in for a session or a class and just seeing all of the equipment. So, for example, in my neighborhood in Tribeca here in Lower Manhattan, we have Real Pilates on Duane Street. And that's where I taught for over a decade as a master teacher. And at Real, you'll see the reformer, of course. You'll see the Cadillac or trapeze table, which is like a 4-poster bed with springs and bars attached to it. You will see the chairs, and there are 3 chairs. Okay, there's the Wanda chair, which was just a small seat that looks like a box with a pedal with springs that attach. There is the high chair, affectionately known as the electric chair, which is a lot heavier, actually, than the Wanda chair, but a lot more supportive and assistive as well. And then there is what we call the baby armchair, which sounds a lot easier than it actually is, which is the case with a lot of Pilates equipment. You can do things on that chair sitting, kneeling, and standing using arm springs. Then we get into the Pilates barrels. There are also 3 of those. There's what we call the high barrel or the ladder barrel, which is sort of like an elevated, like half a beer barrel hump with an attached ladder. Okay, and there's many exercises that we do on that. There is the spine corrector, which is lower to the ground and has a little attached seating triangle, seating wedge where you can be in that space. And then there's the small barrel, which is just a plain old padded, half a beer barrel, if you want to envision that. That can go under the hips and under the shoulders, and that you can also do balance work on both prone and side, as well as on your back. Then we have the pedipole, which is a relatively unstable light pole with arm springs. It is a very tall piece of equipment. The springs just hang off of a T-bar on a wooden platform, and you can stand on it and you do things like chest expansion and other exercises that are specific to the pedipole that really work on balance and opening the chest and upper body strength and all of those things. Then, see, there's still more. Then most Pilates studios, most classical studios have a set of Swedish bars on the wall, and there's a set of exercises that go with the Swedish bars, but that also include things like pull-ups, like good old basic work, as well as other stretches. And then we get to the small pieces, like the really small pieces. Joe Pilates had created the breathalyzer, which essentially is almost like a pinwheel that gives you immediate feedback if you stop breathing during an exercise or if you're not breathing enough. There is the foot corrector, which is, some people like to call it the smallest barrel because it's literally a curved piece of metal on top of 2 springs on a wooden platform that allows you to work the feet. He invented the toe corrector, which is 2 leather loops with a spring in the middle. He invented the head harness, which is a head and neck strengthening piece where the strap goes actually around your forehead or around the back of your head. and there's a heavy spring that attaches to that, and so there's neck strengthening and basically whole front and back and side kind of fascial work that you can do with that head harness. There's the sandbag, which is a certain weight and a certain length of bar, but which is really works well for things like carpal tunnel, for things like tennis elbow, for things like shoulder strength and shoulder stability. There's the magic circle, of course, that everybody knows. And then there's heavy bars that are maybe 1.5 and 2 pounds, and hand weights. Okay, so there's a lot. Now, obviously, Joe Pilates did not invent the heavy bars and hand weights. We know that. But he did invent everything else. Now, in studios, if you go to a more contemporary studio, you might also see foam rollers. You might see TRX. You might see different styles of chair. There's combo chairs. There's the MBE chair. You may see different styles of reformers. You may see balls. But what I want you to know is that those things came much later than Pilates. So there really isn't a Pilates ball. There are stability balls that you can use with some Pilates exercises and do some Pilates-like movements with it, but that's not necessarily a Pilates ball, right? You could do every other kind of ball exercise with it as well. Now, the hallmark of the majority of the pieces of Pilates equipment, really other than the barrels, is springs. And it's also the size and the shape and the specifications of the equipment. So if you have only learned classical Pilates, you have learned on specific brands of equipment, usually Grotz or Pilates Designs. You have worked on reformers that have 4 springs, that are heavy, that are all the same weight, that have a foot bar that is easy to move and only has one position, not 2 or 3, that has leather straps that are not on risers, but that attach to, eye bolts right at the back of the reformer frame. So there are certain things that you kind of get used to with that. When you look at more contemporary brands of equipment, where we might be looking at, say, a balanced body or Stott equipment, you are then looking at different weight springs. So you might see 5 springs on a reformer. They might be green, blue, red, or yellow. And that was me kind of starting from the heaviest going to the lightest. Even if you look at, say, a balanced body or a Stott Cadillac, you might see lighter and heavier leg springs, whereas you'll only see heavy leg springs on a classical Cadillac. The bar has a slightly different shape. There's just little things that you'll notice are different in that equipment. Like, I can basically look at a piece of equipment at this point and tell what brand it is or what brand it's been knocked off from, because there are tons of manufacturers in China and South America that are cranking out basically copies of the Pilates equipment that's been manufactured, in the US for decades. And some of it manufactured in the US for close to 100 years. If you are a Pilates client and you are simply looking to get Pilates equipment for your home, I would ask at the studio where you are doing your Pilates now what equipment they use, because you want to use equipment that you're familiar with. You may think that there's not a huge difference, but there is. And I'm going to give you an example from my own experience. So I rent a space now at a lovely little studio called Grasshopper Pilates in Soho here in Lower Manhattan. And she has a mix of Gratz equipment, of Balanced Body legacy equipment, because Balanced Body is now making some classically inspired equipment, and some Peak Pilates equipment. Now, Peak Pilates is pretty much classical equipment, but the difference in their reformer specifically is that their reformer has ball bearings in the wheels. Now, when Joseph Pilates developed his equipment, his wheels on his reformer did not have ball bearings. This was between the wars. Those were not things to be used lightly for recreation, right? So the Joseph Pilates equipment has no ball bearings. That makes a huge difference in how things feel. So if you are even on a heavier spring, it doesn't matter. The carriage on that reformer doesn't really want to move. In fact, if you have no springs on that carriage and you just set it in place, it doesn't automatically roll anywhere. And even on 4 springs, you can push that carriage out and kind of hold it without it kind of crushing down on your shoulders or feeling weird. So the other day, right before I had my knee surgery, I was in the studio teaching, and I got on the Peak reformer to do some of my footwork and to do a little workout. And I have to tell you that I found that the ball bearings in the wheels really affected my ability to do some of the exercises, because even though I've worked on all of this equipment and in fact had Peak and Balanced Body Apparatus in my own studios for many years, I haven't worked on it in a while, and I actually had to lighten my spring. So I'm just giving you that as an example, because that is classical equipment, but the presence of the ball bearings makes it feel much different than a Gratz reformer. So even kind of within the quote unquote classical and contemporary equipment camps, there are still going to be differences in how things feel. I also recommend, if you are a student of Pilates and you're thinking about getting your own equipment for a home studio, or, opening a commercial studio in a commercial space, that you get equipment that you know. So I've been seeing, teachers posting like, so I'm looking to buy equipment for my studio, and I've looked at, lots of different brands, and I'm wondering what you guys like. And my response to that is always, what were you trained on? What do you know how to use? Because, if you were trained, say, in a classical Gratz studio, and you're not used to a reformer with different weight springs, and adjustable foot bar, and ropes instead of leather straps on risers, the ability to adjust the length of the straps, and maybe a double loop for arms and legs, you just might not be sure what to do with that situation. And frankly, anytime you're not sure as a teacher, or even as your own client, in an exercise environment that involves equipment, you can hurt somebody or get hurt. And that's not saying anything about the quality of your teaching or how great of a teacher you are. It's just that you're working on something not very familiar. For myself, one of the ways that I got comfortable teaching on different brands of equipment was actually going to the studios and taking sessions on different brands of equipment. so that I could feel the differences in the springs and the resistance and the size of the apparatus, okay? Because there are huge differences. Now, Joseph Pilates did also do kind of his version of, say, what you might see as a spring wall, say in a franchise Pilates studio, where he would simply, put eye bolts in and attach springs to the eye bolts. So, the spring wall is definitely like a valid thing. And then you might also see something called a tower, which is basically looks like all of the bars and springs from the Cadillac, from both ends of the Cadillac, that hang against a wall with a mat. And lest I forget, there is also a little known piece of Pilates apparatus called the guillotine.
That's a good name.
And it looks like a guillotine because it attaches to the ceiling, attaches to the floor, and has springs attached to it on a bar that's in a track, but that still moves a little bit, so that there's a lot of stabilizing that you need to do. And there's also bars that you can hang off of and do different flips and other fun things with your guillotine and your body. Now, if you're listening to this and you are feeling overwhelmed, you should be feeling overwhelmed. There is so much that you can do within a full Pilates studio and the full Pilates system that it's truly impressive and kind of mind-boggling. And yes, mat is what we might be most familiar with, but what you need to understand is that mat is portable. Mat can be done anywhere. Mat doesn't require equipment. Mat is body weight. It's very effective, but it's still a very small part of the entirety of Joseph Pilates' work. If you are looking for a piece of home equipment and you don't have space for a reformer or a tower, you can consider getting a chair. Okay, the Pilates chair doesn't take up as much room. It still gives you good spring resistance. But again, if you've never been on one, you want to use one and you want to use it more than once before you buy one. And when you buy one, you want to buy from the same manufacturer of the chair that you're used to working on. And this is really for your own safety. So if you're on Amazon, or if you're just doing lots of searches, or you're on Instagram, or you're on TikTok, and you're looking at social media from different Pilates manufacturing companies, here are a few things that you want to be very careful of, okay? Number one, you want to make sure that the manufacturer is a well-known manufacturer. I have had clients who have bought knockoff Pilates equipment, and I have been faced with spring bars that weren't fixed and rolled, so the springs would actually fall off in between exercises or in between repetitions. I have seen ropes and fittings that weren't really strong enough to work well and ended up fraying the ropes. Seriously, I have seen push-through bars that just go crazy and just keep spinning and wrapping around the equipment. Like, there's just a lot that can go wrong. And you don't want that liability if you're seeing clients on the equipment, number one. And number two, do you really want that for yourself, for your own workouts? Probably not. The second thing is that there are some, unknown to me equipment manufacturers who are all over social media and posting. But when I look online at customer reviews, most of the customers have actually had to get refunds via the Better Business Bureau because they never actually received their equipment and just received like 6 months of excuses as to why the equipment was quote unquote late. You're also going to see some manufacturers who, you're going to look at their website and it looks like a hot mess, and it looks like a hot mess because the business probably is a hot mess. And I would just say to stay away. So who are the kind of major players in Pilates equipment? I'm going to tell you. And I'm also going to let you know that there is an aftermarket in Pilates equipment. So you can go on Facebook and there are aftermarket, used Pilates equipment sales and trades that go on all the time. But at least in the Eastern and Northern hemispheres, here's what we're looking at. What we're looking at is Gratz. And those are the same folks who did some of Joseph Pilates equipment. There is Pilates Designs, which was started actually by one of the engineers that had been at Gratz. And then he went and started his own Pilates equipment company, doing great stuff. There's Balanced Body, which does lovely equipment. They do classical equipment now. It's their legacy line. But they also do contemporary Pilates equipment as well. But all of their stuff is very high quality and they've got great customer service. There's Peak Pilates, which again is a little more towards the classical side of things, but once again, a large scale manufacturer and does nice equipment. I've had it, owned it. There's Stott, which is out of Canada. And if you've never worked with Stott equipment, all I say to you is get to a Stott studio and work on that equipment before you buy it. It tends to be a little bit larger. The springs tend to be a little bit lighter. And for my body in particular, it doesn't always work extremely well. I have rented in Stott studios long term and am very familiar with the Stott equipment. And personally, it's just not my fave. But that's me. You can have a completely different opinion and experience in that, and that is fine. Now, for the smaller pieces that I talked to you about, the breathalyzer, the foot correctors, the toe correctors, those things, you can find some of them on Amazon and other websites. But I once again, recommend that you go to a Gratz or Pilates Designs or Balanced Body and look at them there. Now, as you know, I am a huge fan of also things that mimic Pilates equipment, all things band and tubing with handles and Thai 4. Balanced Body sells something called Motor, which I've used, which is kind of like a roller, but has straps and handles, and, that can be okay. So, just be mindful when you're looking at things. And if you have questions, then get online and ask, or once again, ask your teacher or ask at the studio where you go. A lot of times studios are happy to facilitate you getting equipment. Like they will order it for you, or they'll hook you up with their sales rep, or sometimes the studio will even be selling equipment and you will simply be able to buy used equipment from the studio. So there's many ways of getting it, but if you want it, those are my guidelines for picking your equipment. And basically, if you've been working on Pilates equipment that you like, that and that's worked for your body, that's what I recommend you get. And chances are it's not going to be an off-brand. Chances are it's going to be a known brand of studio equipment. Also know that a lot of the studio equipment manufacturers do make slightly less expensive, lighter weight home versions of the equipment that aren't, necessarily built to withstand, 12 hours of sessions every single day. But that will be fine for you to do an hour or two of exercise a few times a week. And that, my friends, is what I have to say about the Pilates equipment. I will put links to the different manufacturers in the show notes so that you can take a look at what they have and what they're selling. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns, shoot me an email, Lynda@LyndaLippin.com, DM me on social, leave a comment on one of my posts, and I will totally get back to you on that. So that's it for me. Have a fabulous rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for listening to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Music brought to you by Nerd Salad. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, especially if you liked it. And please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks.